Hey everybody and welcome. I'm just getting myself set up here. How are you guys? Let me know in the chat. Oh, first things first, housekeeping. I want everybody to click on the chat and you are going to see a little blue button and it says hosts and panelists. And I want you to click that and I want you to switch it to everybody. And that is so that when you ask a question or if you have a comment or you need clarification about something, everybody can see what is sort of going on and feel free to engage with each other and answer each other. If you want to say hi, let me know where you're from. That would be fantastic. I know you guys are kind of from everywhere. I always like knowing sort of where we are reaching, where we are connecting with each other. So in case we haven't met before, just while everybody's coming in, my name is Amy and I am a Monash certified IBS health coach and I work with women who basically just want to get control of their lives. They're sick of sort of having their IBS come first, stealing all of their time, their energy, their commitments, and who just want to live their lives the way that they want. And today we are here to talk about calming those pre-launch jitters. So we have been talking over the last 5 days now about really how to launch your low FODMAP diet. We talked about sort of prepping your game plan. We've talked about like getting your pantry, your fridge, your freezer ready. We've talked about reading labels. We've talked about sneaky FODMAPs. We have really set you up to just walk into a grocery store and get your low FODMAP diet on the move. And I know that sometimes that can sort of cause our little critter brain to, do a little hoedown in the back of our brains, be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I understand now sort of like how to get that done, but I don't quite understand what I'm doing. So again, I've been collecting all your questions from the Facebook group, the ones you guys have sent me an email, and I popped in a couple ones that I just get very commonly every time I do a Q&A, just to make sure that you guys are set up for success, that we're addressing the things that you're worried about, so that you really feel confident and comfortable. So that you feel confident and comfortable as you are launching your low FODMAP diet. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to grab my questions here, move over my chat. All right, so many questions about FODMAP stacking, and this is totally normal, and it's because FODMAP stacking is something we talk about a lot. You are hearing about it all the time on Instagram. I know I hear about it all the time on Instagram. You are seeing articles. I have articles. I have YouTube videos. It seems like every time we're talking about FODMAP stacking is like right up in there. And so first things first, we talked about this a little bit on Wednesday, but there was a little bit of confusion in the group. So we're just going to clarify. FODMAP stacking is just eating too many foods from the same FODMAP group too close together. One more time, eating too many foods from the same FODMAP group too close together. And that might look like too many foods on the same plate. It might look like too many foods like in 2 meals, or like a meal and a snack that are just too close together. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid these 2 servings colliding in your intestines and sort of traveling through your gut as one gigantic serving that might overflow your FODMAP bucket. And I know that sounds alarming, scary to a lot of people. It's okay, we're gonna break it down, okay? So here is the scoop. Here's what you need to know. Most FODMAP trained dietitians, most FODMAP trained specialists recommend sticking to the 1.5 rule for foods. And so if you look in the Monash app, you're going to see on the green serving size has a little note underneath that says that the way that they measure these foods is so that you can mix and match them. So you could have more than 1 serving. But then it becomes how many servings before I hit this sort of stacking effect. So we use the 1.5 rule, and that is literally just 1.5 servings from the same FODMAP group in a sitting. And Monash defines a sitting is between like 3 and 5 hours. Usually it used to be like 3 to 4 hours. And so we like to think of it as mealtime. So if you have, say, fructans for breakfast, it's okay if you have fructans for lunch, right? Like that is enough time past that, your breakfast is far enough along your intestines that your lunch is not going to sort of like join it at some point and become a giant fructan mess, right? The only sort of caveat to that rule is fruit. And that is because fruit we limit to one serving per sitting. And that's because for most people, fruit is so high, it's so close to their FODMAP threshold that 1 serving is kind of enough to fill up that FODMAP bucket. And because we want to include fruits in a healthy and balanced low FODMAP diet, we really don't want to be combining them. So that not in like a 1.5, like you can mix and match your fruits, but we do want to make sure that they're staying to that 1 serving. So as an example, of what sort of mixing and matching these foods would look like, think about like making a stir fry. Okay, so we're making a stir fry together and we're going to include leeks and mushrooms, which are both polyols. Okay, so a serving of leeks is, I think it's like 2/3 of a cup. So that would be 1 serving of polyols. And then 6 canned mushrooms is also 1 serving of polyols. So right now we have 2 servings technically. So if we were going to have this stir fry, we would want to get it down to those 1.5 servings. And so we would either need to cut out half of the leeks, or we would need to cut out half of the mushrooms, or we would need to do however you want to sort of sever those servings, we would need them to work out to 1.5 servings. So one of the easiest ways to do this is really just to make sure that you've got a variety of different foods on your plate. If you are balancing your plate with just regular dietary sort of regulations, which is half of that plate being like leafy things, half of that plate being starchy things, and then a half of that plate being protein, whether that is plant or animal-based protein, odds are you're going to have a mix of FODMAPs on your plate. And so if you are following a balanced diet, it's really not something that you need to worry about. Like I said on Wednesday, most people actually don't need to sort of consider FODMAP stacking. And so if you are just getting started, I just want you to let that go for now, okay? I want you to let it go. If you are in your first like week or 2 or 3, we only really look for FODMAP stacking if you've made it to that 2nd or 3rd week and you haven't seen a nudge in your symptoms yet. Then we would think to ourselves like, okay, maybe there's some FODMAP stacking here, like just write everything down, keep it in a food journal, and then we have the ability to go back in time and sort of go through and do some FODMAP math and say like, like, okay, like I noticed you tend to pair these 2 vegetables together. Let's like do those on different days. Or I'm noticing, you're plant-based and you seem to have a lot of protein sources from the same group in the same meals, or like we're finding them in a snack and a meal close together. Let's try spacing those out differently. But you don't have to worry about it until there's a problem, okay? So I have so many of my clients, they come in, they're really nervous about FODMAP stacking. They want to know all about it. They want me to teach them to do the math. And half the time they don't even have FODMAP sensitivities. Like you would be shocked at how many times people come in, they are benefiting from the low FODMAP diet, they leave, they have no FODMAP sensitivities, and it's just that we've lowered that white noise to the point where they can actually feel something else in their body, and that's the linchpin. And so I don't want you to lose sleep. I don't want you to be stressing out. I don't want to sort of have your FODMAP buckets full of this anxiety over something that we don't know applies to you yet, if that makes sense. So again, if you are just getting started, you're like anywhere between like week 1 and week 3, don't worry about it, right? We will get to that problem if we need to, and also we'll get there when we get there, okay? So another question that I get, and this is kind of in line with the FODMAP stacking, is how carefully do we need to measure my food? So this is a fantastic question. So thank you. I got this one by email, I think. So thank you to whoever sent me this one. It's fantastic. And I have seen it floating around, so it's timely. But foods are listed 2 ways in the Monash app, which is the official list of high and low FODMAP foods. And so the way that they're listed can be confusing sometimes. So let's talk about that first. So the first way that they're listed is by dietary serving size. And so that means that Monash has actually pulled in a team of dietitians to tell them what is the dietary serving of like cheese? What is the dietary serving of blueberries? What is the dietary serving of bread? So that they know like this is what a standard serving size looks like. And then they kind of run the standard serving size through their machines and determine is it high or low FODMAP. And this is where things can get a little bit complicated because if the standard serving is low FODMAP, great, Monash is going to list the standard serving in their app because it's a dietary app. They're not going to tell you to go eat double the chocolate, double the recommended serving of chocolate. That's not their jam. But what happens if you put a standard serving in the machine and it comes out high FODMAP? Well, then Monash is going to go through and they're going to say, well, what serving would be low FODMAP? And they're going to list that in the app instead. And so sometimes when you're going through the app, you're going to be like, like I would like an 1/8 of an avocado was a really great example. You can have 30 grams of an avocado, which is not very much. You can do a ton of stuff with it. So don't be hating on avocados there. But the idea is 1/8 of an avocado is not a standard serving, but it is low FODMAP. And so that is what is listed in the app. But if you look at something like oyster mushrooms, I think oyster mushrooms are listed at a cup. is low FODMAP. Oyster mushrooms are magic. You can have those if you like mushrooms. But if you look at oyster mushrooms, 1 cup of oyster mushrooms is listed as a low FODMAP serving. But if you look down in the notes, it actually says servings of 2.2 pounds of oyster mushrooms are moderately high in FODMAPs. So I don't know about you, but I think I would throw up if I put 2.2 pounds of mushrooms in my body. Like FODMAPs are not like, I don't think I'd be reacting to the FODMAPs in that situation. So like I said on Wednesday, make sure that you're checking out the notes when you're looking at things, because often you'll find that you have like a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to the way that things are listed. Because they're not always listed by the actual FODMAP tolerance. Sometimes they're just listed by the dietary recommendations. So make sure you're reading the whole thing through. When it comes to how strictly you need to measure, again, you're going to need to do a little bit of sleuthing, nothing to cause like stress. This is a low FODMAP diet, not a no FODMAP diet. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be intentional. So if you're going through and you're looking at something like blackberries, for example, blackberry, it's a fruit, so we know it's kind of close to the FODMAP threshold already, but 1 blackberry is low FODMAP. So you know that's going to be pretty close to the threshold if they're listing it as 1. You have a pretty strong craving if you're going to give up your polio sort of ration for that meal for 1 blackberry. But that is a sign that you should respect that boundary, because we know that that's pretty high. Up there, we know that there's not a ton of wiggle room. I guess, well, no, for fruits, it's 1 serving. I was going to say you could do 1.5, but no, you can only do 1 for that serving. But yeah, so if it comes to things like, let me think about this for a second. Okay, so like if you're going to do something like a blackberry, we know that that's so close to the threshold. If you were going to do something though, like if something is listed at like a 1/4 cup, you don't have to pull out a measuring cup, right? Like you don't need to be measuring your stuff in grams. So like if you're going to do something, if you're going to do something and it's listed at a 1/4 cup, like do not go and pull a 1/2 cup. That's not what we're doing, right? But if it is a 1/4 cup, you can eyeball it. Like I really encourage my clients to learn how to measure things with their hands, so that if they're out, they're like at a holiday thing, they're out, like at a buffet or they're at a work thing or whatever, they know like I can have like this many spoonfuls of something, or I can have a handful or 2 of something, or like my family, we use ramekins. So like at our house, I learned how to measure with my own dishes. And so like we have these little things, like I use them mostly for holding dog treats to bribe my dogs while we're doing things like this. But I know like when I'm measuring blueberries, like I'm not using a scale, I'm not counting them and putting them in a ramekin, because I know that's approximately the correct serving of blueberries. Now, when you're getting into things where the green serving or that low FODMAP serving is very close to the yellow serving, or it's very close to a red serving, then again, we want to honor that boundary. And so that's a time where you would want to be sort of bringing out like your measuring spoons, or you would want to bring out a measuring cup. And it's because we know that that one has a little bit less space before we're going to overflow our bucket, and that's not what we're shooting for right now. So again, you do not have to measure stuff by grams unless you're baking and it's just handy for you. You try and be respectful, like I said, if the serving is very, very small, or if the sort of green serving and amber or red serving are very close together, and the rest of it is really just kind of doing your best. Like the point is not to give you anxiety. That's going to fill up your FODMAP buckets even more. And so that's not helpful to us. Just as a side note, the Monash app uses Australian measurements because it's from Australia.